What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video, and welcome to the first day in Kansas in like weeks and weeks of time that we actually have sun. It's not raining and it's above 30 degrees. It is creeping up on 50 degrees here on this lovely Sunday day, and I thought that would bring us out into the driveway here and I would explain or talk about what I spend when I am rebuilding my WJs. I'm saving all the WJs. I don't think I've ever really gotten into cost on what I've got into these things. Now, this will probably be a boring video for all of you guys that don't care, but if you're actually interested in what I do or what I put into these things, I will talk about my whole ridiculous, huge laundry list of things that I do, the cost, whatever. So let's start off with the Jeep itself. This 99 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo with the 4.7 with 203,000 miles on the clock, I was able to shrewdly negotiate and get down to $1,000. Now, it did need obviously a ton of work, but that's what we're here for. We're here to save them all. So we have our initial $1,000 investment in this thing. Now, to even drive the thing home, it ended up not even having a battery in it. There was a language barrier, communication issue. It didn't have a battery. Dad and I had to run and go grab a battery. So I've got a $100 battery in this thing before I was even able to drive this thing home. Luckily, it fired up and everything was happy with it, but yes. Wheels and tires, kind of the next thing here on my list. I am always hunting on Facebook Marketplace for my factory Wrangler JK or JL takeoffs. Now, these things are an absolute dime a dozen on Facebook Marketplace because absolutely nobody wants factory Wrangler sport wheels other than me. I've bought many sets of them over the last year or so for my rebuilders. And I'm normally able to pick these things up for $300 to $400 with wheels and tires. Normally they are in extremely good shape like these are. These are a fresh set of takeoff tires with a set of JK sport wheels. So like I said, I'm like $300 into these wheels and tires. Now, no, these aren't cool mud terrains or all terrains, but they're a fresh set of tires that are round, hold air, and aren't all weather cracked and destroyed. Now, I typically buy most of my parts on Rock Auto. There's just a huge amount of options on cheap, expensive, whatever you want to find, and normally shipping is relatively quick. So I am normally buying a majority of my parts on Rock Auto. Here lately, I've also been kind of venturing onto eBay because you can sometimes find slightly better deals. So grand total with all my Rock Auto parts on this was $453. And then equally here, we've got our total eBay purchase, which was $283. Now again, a few other random parts and pieces. The front drive shaft CV joint was torn, like the boots often get on these things. So we've got a $42 driveshaftshop.com joint kit on this thing to make that nice and happy. Now, for a lift, I put a Rough Country 2-inch spacer lift on absolutely every single one of these things just because it makes them look a little bit nicer. It gets them off the ground a little bit and they don't look like boring little Jeep Grand Cherokees, and it's obviously needed to help clear Wrangler takeoff wheels and tires. So that's why we've got our Rough Country 2-inch spacer lift, which with shipping is $107. I've primarily been reusing the shocks that come on these things because for street driving, even with that 2-inch lift, you still have a decent amount of suspension travel. So I'm not throwing cool Bilstein shocks and all of that on these things that are primarily just going to be driven on the street. Now, this one did need a windshield, not replaced, but resealed. The first time driving this thing through the car wash, it was absolutely pouring water in on me. I have not had one leaking so aggressively before. Come to find out, the windshield had obviously been replaced, and it was a very botched job here on the Jeep. There was gaps in the urethane or glue for that windshield, so I had my glass guy. Luckily, I've got a glass guy. He came out, we cut the old windshield out, cleaned up all the mating surfaces, and he properly urethaned the windshield back in the thing. So I'm $100 out making this thing not pour water into the cab. Now guys, other miscellaneous things, parts, pieces, fluids, that's kind of something that will slowly add up on you. On every single one of these things, I change every single fluid. Engine oil gets changed with the filter, obviously. Front axle fluid, rear axle fluid, transfer case fluid with the proper Mopar fluid, and last but not least, transmission fluid. In this case, a 545, it has 2 filters inside, your RTV for the pan and fluid, so another $200 with all of that stuff, depending on your where you're getting it, if you already have that sitting at home in your garage. So account for a little bit of that. So as we stand there, we're 2,300 plus into this Jeep, but there's always a few ways that these Jeeps can pay you back for putting them on the road. And what I mean by that is potentially being able to sell things you're taking off the Jeep. This Jeep happened to have really, really nice new tires on the factory wheels. Unfortunately, they would have looked really small after I put my 2-inch lift on, but again, they were a really, really decent set of all-terrain 16-inch tires. I was able to throw them on my local Facebook marketplace and sell them for $350, which pays me back for a lot of the parts, pieces, repairs, that kind of stuff. Correspondingly, the wheels were honestly in really good shape for old 16-inch WJ wheels. Threw those on the local Facebook marketplace and sold those for $80 a piece, because that knocks us down to about $20 a wheel. And honestly, you can take them into your local scrap metal recycling place and almost get that $20 a wheel. So don't just throw your old crusty aluminum wheels away, pile them up in a corner, and then eventually take them into your local town's recycling center. You bring them all in, you weigh them, and they cut you a check or cash for your aluminum scrap, if you will. So I was able to, just with the wheels and tires, make over $400 that I was able to take off of what I've spent on this thing. So kind of grand total, I'm in this Jeep roughly $2,000, give or take, obviously some nickels and dimes here and there, but yeah, roughly $2,000. Now, the big thing that we are not taking into account is labor. Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of labor put into, putting one of these back together, cleaning them up, just everything that goes into it. Multiple weekends of work with the lift, the fluids. Yeah, if I was counting my labor on all of these WJs, I would be losing thousands and thousands of dollars, I'm sure. But guys, it's a labor of love here, keeping the WJs on the road, and I would hope that it shows, this being my 12th one that we've saved from imminent danger in the salvage yard. So guys, that is all of the money side of things. I thought I would go through my ridiculous list here of every single part and piece that I've replaced on this one. Now, obviously, all of the Jeeps are going to be a little bit different, whether it's a 4.7 that had a dropped valve seat or a kicked rocker and I had to pull the cylinder heads off to do things, that's going to be a little bit more. But I've always kind of found the general rule of thumb on every single one of these that I am having to spend about $1,000 to $1,500 just right off the jump in parts, pieces, repairs, to get the thing where it needs to be happily driven and hopefully live a long life with a new home or new owner, if you will. So we will start with all the parts and pieces I repaired or replaced on this thing. Okay, here we go. Rear upper ball joint replaced, both left and right motor mounts replaced, the power steering pressure hose replaced, the battery was replaced, the thermostat and thermostat gasket, both front wiper blades, left front wheel bearing, both front hood struts, the lift gate lock actuator, the front drive shaft joint, the rear brakes, the oil filler neck gasket, the right front wheel bearing, the oil pan drain plug, both left and right front tie rod ends, both left and right front drag link ends. This Jeep got swapped to 0507 plastic valve covers and correspondingly new valve cover gaskets. A new blower motor was replaced, a blower motor resistor was replaced, the rear axle pinion bearings the rear axle carrier bearings, the rear pinion seal, the front lower left and right control arms, the rear lower left and right control arms, and last but not least, the driver's seat cover. The bottom seat cover was replaced. So that is all the things, worn out, broken, damaged, whatever, that I found on this thing that got replaced. Maintenance on this thing, like we kind of already talked about: oil change, front axle fluid, rear axle fluid, PCV valve replaced, spark plugs replaced, transmission fluid with both filters replaced, the engine air filter, the transfer case fluid, and then last but not least, threw it on the alignment rack after the lift to make sure everything was where it needed to be. Now our mods, if you will, we've got window tint on this thing to match the rear windows. We've got a JL factory steering dampener thrown on this thing, JL front sway bar links, JT Gladiator rear sway bar links, and now all of those are just kind of, unfortunately or fortunately, free takeoffs from stock Wranglers and Gladiators that have been lifted. So hopefully you can find those videos and get with your local Jeep groups and see if anybody will donate any old parts and pieces to your old WJ. We've got our 2-inch rough country lift, our JK sport wheels, and our takeoff new tires. So that's where we're at on this thing, and it's kind of done. I've been daily driving this thing for, gosh, 1,200 miles now, and that's always kind of a fun thing for me, is driving these things daily as I'm putting them back together. It's always a little bit of a trust thing here when you're driving a new Jeep that's been sitting for God knows how many years behind a building in someone's yard, or in this case, sitting behind an apartment building with leaves and grass grown up around it because it had been sitting for, again, who knows how long. But yeah, I thought I would go through one because I don't think I've ever made this video with any of my rebuilder, any of my Save the WJ Jeeps. So that's what goes into one of these for me. And again, if you were keeping the thing and making it even bigger, your parts are going to go up as you're buying bigger parts and pieces. But this is kind of where I stop on my rebuilders. Like I said, at this point, the vehicle could be driven forever, pending you keep up with your maintenance, you keep up with your fluids, you don't overheat it, you don't run it out of oil. All those things that any vehicle would be, needed for maintenance and stuff like that. So, yeah, got another one done, and I'll, of course, always be watching Facebook Marketplace and watching the side of the roads for more. So guys, hopefully if you have thought about saving your own WJ, that's kind of what goes into the whole process for me, and kind of where I'm normally spending, again, the vehicle's purchase price plus $1,000 to $1,500, depending on what it needs done. Obviously a little on the high side if you're doing engine work, and a littler on the lesser side if the thing runs and drives. And so far, after 1,200 miles, I still haven't really found why this thing was sidelined. That's always a little worrisome when you don't figure out what is wrong with it, or why it was parked. So far, it's ran and drove what drives me 60 plus miles an hour down the road to work every single day, and the heat works and the AC works, and yeah, I'm not really sure why this thing ended up behind an apartment building. But yeah, that's what goes into a WJ. A 20-year-old, tired, neglected, left for dead Jeep is hopefully going to live another long life on the road. I don't know if it's going to live another 20 years or not, but at least we've got a few more years of work and life out of a vehicle that otherwise would have just ended up being taken to the salvage yard, crushed, scrapped, and yeah, I'd rather see these things on the road. So guys, thank you so much for coming out on, like I said, like the first day that's nice here in the last 2 weeks here. And yeah, I'm impatiently waiting for our next big, huge Jeep here on the channel. I've ordered a cool one, and I'm hopeful that it will show up in the upcoming months, and we're gonna have a ton of videos on putting that thing together. Super excited for that. Until that thing shows up, guys, I'll of course always be looking on Marketplace for the next project. So guys, thanks for coming out with me, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.